And thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the HireClout team and our marketing team for putting this all together. More importantly, thank you for the folks, the wonderful panelists that are here, Fee, Peter, and Yolanda. I'll do better intros for them very soon. But for now, I just wanted to really thank everybody for being here. Heads up, I've moderated and I've been quite a few live physical panels. I've never done a webinar, so this is new to me, but hopefully it's enjoyable and hopefully it's organic and we all get a ton out of it. I've known these wonderful panelists for in certain cases for a very long time, certain cases in short time, but the reason I asked them to join is because they know a ton. And we try to do a little bit of a 360 here where we have heads of talent acquisition departments at fast growing startups, as well as a chief operating officer of a startup. So we look at it both from the lens of a talent acquisition leader and also the business side. And of course, me being the founder and CEO of HireClout, a global tech recruiting consulting firm, tech and go-to-market recruiting consulting firm, we've seen hundreds, if not thousands of companies scale and also not scale. So welcome and thanks for being here. I mean, the topic for today is how to scale your team without compromising culture, quality, and momentum, right? Often we do so much work with our wonderful employees, and a lot of times we spend so much time with them when they're not working instead of doing all the right work in the beginning of scaling, but scaling smart. So we're going to start with a small poll so we know what everybody's interested in. What made you come to this webinar? So let's start there. Please take a few seconds to answer the 3 or 4 questions we have for you. All right, guys, now that you've hopefully finished that poll, very short introduction of who I am. Some of you know me, some of you don't. I am Avetis Antaplyan, founder and CEO of HireClout. We're a small but mighty global tech recruiting and consulting firm. We had our own struggles with scaling, but within a few years, when we got the hiring right internally, not just for our clients, we became a 2-time Inc. 5000 honoree. We won a few awards, and I am, as an investor, entrepreneur, board member to a lot of startups, I've just seen so many things done well and a lot of things done improperly. And hiring is where it all starts, right? Because once you let the wrong people in, or you scale too quickly, or you scale the wrong way, now you've got to sit here and spend the next several years cleaning up. And so that's why we felt like this was a worthy conversation. Enough about me. Let's move to the more important people in the room. And hopefully everyone's here now, but let's start with Peter Renault. Peter is the head of talent acquisition of Cornerstone OnDemand. When I met Peter several years ago, they were in the high 100s, and within a few years, he helped them scale and go public. I believe when they went public, they had 4,000 or 5,000 employees, and now they are $1 billion a year plus revenue company. They went public, then went private through a private equity deal. So he's seen it all, right? So I'm really excited to pick his brain. In the middle, we have Yolanda Arrey. Hopefully Yolanda made it. She was in a different meeting. Yolanda has built high performance, inclusive talent teams that scale at incredible companies like Bitly, Meta, several others. We can talk about that later as well. So she's seen it from already publicly traded companies that are hyper growth organizations. I think she even worked directly with Mr. Zuckerberg. So we'll have some great insights from her. And then we have Fee, who has worked at Fivo, who was the chief operating officer of Luxury Presence when I met him. And I believe there were 30 people when he started, and when he moved on to join Google, they were at just over 700 employees. So Fee is all about accelerating business growth through efficient problem solving and relentless execution. So I'm really glad to have him as well. Thank you so much, panelists, for being here. All right. Let's get to work, guys. Let's talk a little bit about the foundations of startup hiring. Building recruitment infrastructure that powers sustainable growth for the right stage. Again, hiring fast is easy, right? You post some jobs, you pray the right people land on your lap, and you hire them. It's really that simple. But if done incorrectly, you're going to have a lot of disjointed pieces. In fact, even as a small company, just a few years ago, we had that, right? We had wonderful people starting, but the onboarding wasn't quite done right. Some of the folks we hired through a rush because we had so much business, we needed to react. Sometimes we didn't have the right avenues. We were just posting and praying. So that's what we want to talk about. So let's get to work. Let's start talking a little bit about this. So, Fee, I want to kind of talk to you a little bit about this. Like, what are the signals that indicate a startup needs to transition from founder-led hiring to a dedicated kind of talent, function, and thoughtful approach to hiring? And what should be the first kind of person you hire in these organizations?
Yep, I'm happy to kick this one off. So when I think about some of the triggers that would make us think about maybe formalizing a little bit more, the first that comes to mind is co-founders spending an excessive amount of time on hiring. It becomes an operational bottleneck to the rest of the company. If I had pressed for a percentage, I would say if you're spending 25, 30% of your time or more on hiring, it's really time to formalize. Another trigger would be consistent hiring volume becomes the norm. You're not hiring, 1 to 3 people at a time anymore. You need to consistently put 5 or 10 people in roles every month and get hiring classes done. I would say another is a lot of times startups will go through a funding round, and then there's a mandate from their board to start scaling the team really rapidly. You don't want to be doing that on your own. You want to have a formalized talent team that is helping support that effort. And then finally, I would say if there's a needed playbook for a repeatable hiring process, you're not hiring different roles, you're hiring the same role over and over. That's the time to start thinking about getting that playbook down. And then as far as the first key hires to really help in this transition, I would say what I've seen success with is a full cycle recruiter or a talent partner who really handles the entire end-to-end hiring process, builds all the TA systems, and is very much acting as someone who can build the infrastructure at the same time they're helping you recruit. So that's really critical.
Nice, thank you, Pete, for that. Yolanda, hopefully you're here. Can you share a specific recruiting framework that delivered exceptional results in a high velocity environments where you couldn't sacrifice quality? So you've got to hire a lot. You've got high velocity hiring to do, but you can't sacrifice the quality. You're not at a point where you could just hire, people, anybody in any seat.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that the key to balancing speed and smart decision making, from my experience, what I found is a formula that I called build, buy, or borrow. Right. So building means you're building your own employees, you're promoting from within. And then buy is you're hiring external talent that will come in with specialized skill sets that your team today doesn't have. And then of course, borrowing is your hiring contractors or consultants that can come in and solve quick problems. You want to look at it from that 360 lens. But most importantly, you want to also ask clarifying questions, not just about here's a job description, but really, what does success look like in this role? For what does a person in this role need to achieve in the next year? Specific skills that is needed, and then also what kind of teammate would thrive in that culture. And you really want to make sure that your interviewers are screening for skills, especially when it comes to fast-paced environments, things like adaptability, drive, ability to learn quickly. So they're not just chasing after shiny resumes, but they're actually thinking about the business long term. Because as you know, especially a lot of businesses, there could be a market expansion in the future, there could be a new product launch in the future. We really want to not hire for immediate needs, but for people that can align with the business long term. So that's a strategy that I've seen that really garners success, especially when you're thinking about speed and quality.
That's huge. It sounds like we're well beyond job description, especially in a day and age where you can pop in a few words into ChatGPT and it could give you any job description. This is really thinking about, not only who's going to succeed in this current role, but also scale with the company and help it get to the next stage, correct? That's great. Thank you for that, Yolanda. That's great. Peter, beyond just compliance issues, what specific strategic and cultural challenges blindside companies expanding it internationally? Because I know you all are international. You have, not only offices all over the world, but you have customers all over the world. How do you navigate them without losing momentum?
Yeah, since I've joined Cornerstone, we've expanded a lot in the US and internationally. I'd say some things that we've learned. I think the first thing is when you think about, like, we're talking about location strategy, you need to have a plan and be really intentional from the start about that. I think a challenge that I've seen happen is you might decide that you want to, let's say, build out a team in a location like, let's say, Mumbai. You don't want to have your second person you hire be in Bangalore just because you got a referral. I think what can happen a lot of the times is you become a little bit too flexible and you end up with these scattered and kind of underdeveloped hubs that end up not lasting and kind of wilt away. The second thing, I think, when you're looking at expanding internationally or wherever you're expanding, even if it's domestically, is you should really try to understand the supply and demand of skills in the regions that you're looking to go to. I know I use Talent Insights a lot for this. It's a really great tool. You can see how many people in a region have a certain skill, how in demand that skill is, what companies you'll be competing against, et cetera. And you can start to kind of align some of your location strategy around that. I'd say also don't overlook cultural nuances. What works in the US does not always translate to other markets. We've learned that the hard way at Cornerstone. What works in the US does not work in India or work in EMEA or APJ or wherever we might be recruiting in. I know, like, for example, compensation. We really valued RSUs at Cornerstone when we were a public company, but when we expanded into other markets, we were giving RSUs and we noticed that candidates didn't care as much about RSUs as maybe like a US candidate. So we had to rethink about what our compensation structure and package look like there. The other thing, of course, is like the first hires wherever you go. Those the most important hires. They really set the tone, so you can't rush those. Those ones absolutely have to be right. And then the other thing is when you grow too, you just need, the last thing I'd say is you need to make sure that there are growth opportunities for people in those new locations. You don't want to just start hiring and have no idea about what it's going to look like next for them. If you're going to, let's say, like, build out a call center in a new location, you need to be able to show, like, here are the next levels that you join as a call center 1, 2, 3. There's opportunities to move into leadership, et cetera. It's not just an area that you're bringing in, some worker bees and you're not planning to really expand any further.
Peter, you brought up such a good point that even at our stage, we witnessed that. We did the same approach. What better approach than using referrals to build your team, especially overseas? But we had the same issue. We had underdeveloped kind of hubs and they weren't really communicating with each other. In fact, with one of the hubs, I think it was in India, we said, great, we should get you guys together. Maybe you have like an office, you could work hybrid. And we found out everybody was like 3 hours train ride away from each other. And so we really didn't know enough. And again, we just kind of went with the flow, which is fun, but it wasn't strategic. So we felt that as well. Thank you for that, Peter. As general question to either one of you, whoever's more passionate about this, what's the single most devastating early hiring mistake you've either made or you've seen made that fundamentally changed how your company approaches recruitment today, or you approach recruitment when you go to whatever companies you've worked at? Peter, you look like you have one. You got that. I've
No, I'm
got a
just trying to
story
think if I've
face.
ever had a bad hire. Like in a Cornerstone, I can't think of one.
Yeah, I'm sure there's never been one.
I can think of one. Oh,
Please, Yolanda.
Peter, are you gonna go?
No, go. I'm thinking.
Oh, okay. Okay. I would say a mistake that I've seen, and I still see some of this happening today, is a lot of emphasis on credentials to the extent that we overlook potential. And so if you look back, say even 10 years ago, right, there was this wave where everyone wanted to hire a software engineer. I mean, engineers were being like bombarded with recruiter, invites for interviews. And then what has happened now is that technology has shifted to AI, and AI is the new hot thing, right? And so you're seeing people now moving into skills of AI infrastructure or platform engineering skills. And so what happens is that when you focus on credentials and you're really trying to hire someone who has literally done the exact same job before, you're not giving people the opportunity to actually grow their career. And you're not focused on the candidate's ability to demonstrate agility, ability to adapt into a new market, because they can only do what they've done for so long. And I still see that manifest today, where you would see the reasons why people don't get certain jobs is because they literally haven't done the job word for word. But the reality is that great candidates don't want to repeat the same job that they've done for the past 10 years. They want to evolve. They want to move on to new things. And I think it's important for employers to really create that cushion of, yes, maybe 80% is credential, but there's that 20% that we're going to give you to grow into the role. So you accept the job for the opportunity that you will grow for 20%, right? And that makes it enticing for you to come in. And then also it makes it interesting for you to evolve as a candidate.
That's huge. That's really good feedback, Yolanda. So it's you don't hire people that have every bullet that they've done exactly the same job at exactly the same type of company, because where is the excitement? Where's the growth for them? Right? And folks that are, it's a little bit of almost a step up for them. They're more excited. They're more willing to try new things and learn and bring in different ways of doing things. Really good. How about you, Peter? Anyone? Go ahead, Yolanda, please.
No, I was just going to say, and they stay at the company longer, right? Because they're growing in their career. Whereas the person who has done that before can get bored and will want to move on to the next big, exciting thing.
Great feedback.
Peter, did you want to go first?
I mean, the kind of a +1 to what Yolanda said. I thought she articulated that very well. I think, yeah, I think what you can get into in some of those situations too is I don't want to say overhype the position, but you can make it seem a little bit bigger because it's such a big, important position, and then the person joins and the growth's not there that you initially thought in the region or whatever it may be. And yeah, to Yolanda's point, they don't normally last. They're looking for, people want a role that's a step up, a new challenge. And yeah, so I would say just kind of a +1 at what Yolanda said.
Great. All right.
One misstep that I've both witnessed and made is you get a really impressive candidate who comes in, you fall in love with this shiny resume, and then you start allowing them to dictate the scope of the position. So for example, you might say, I'm hiring for a chief financial officer. Someone comes in, they have a lot of accolades, and then you find out they also have a legal background. And so now you're thinking, wow, I can make this one hire who can accomplish both of these things. And so what do? You go back and you start rescoping the role to fit this person, as opposed to saying, the reason I started out looking for a CFO is because I have real issues on this side, and it's a full-time job, it's a big role, and I need them to be extremely successful with this before I start thinking about expanding their domain. So that's one thing that I want to caution, some of the founders and folks who are scaling up to avoid doing, is stay extremely disciplined about what you're looking for.
Nice. That's great advice. Thank you for that. Guys, let's talk a little bit about the next topic, which is creating an irresistible talent proposition, right? And the key focus here is competing for exceptional talent without big company advantages. Some of you have worked at huge brands, right? Workday, Meta, Google, or Work Now. And some of you have not, right? You've worked at great companies, but they might not have this huge brand. So let's talk a little bit about how to get top-notch talent without being one of the Fangs or Mangs or Mamas or whatever it's called now. Peter, let's start with you. When competing against tech giants, especially because your pseudo headquarters is now in the Bay Area, and well-funded competitors, what are like unconventional approaches that you've helped to secure candidates who initially seemed kind of out of reach because maybe they worked at some of these bigger companies?
Yeah, and that's a good question, and we deal with this a lot at Cornerstone. I'd say that at Cornerstone, we're not a startup, right? We're not a huge household name though, right? We're a big company, but people in college have not heard of Cornerstone. Most people don't know who Cornerstone is. And so we've had to be very thoughtful about how we show up in the market. The first thing is we don't pretend to be something we're not, right? We focus on what it is we do have to offer, and there's a lot I feel like we have to offer at Cornerstone. The thing that when I talk to candidates about this, it's really, you can be a bigger fish in a smaller pond, and you can make real impact on products that touch millions of users. You get to work across functions, get visibility with leadership, and try things out that you wouldn't really be able to do at a company that has 100,000 people, right? One of those FANG companies. I think we also, too, at Cornerstone, we like to focus on our mission, which is altruistic. We help people learn, grow, thrive at work, and that resonates especially with younger talent, I feel like, who want to feel like their work matters. And then also just focus on the fact that we serve some of the most impressive companies in the world. I think when we highlight that and we combine it with our focus on employee growth and development, which we have a lot of at Cornerstone, that it creates a compelling story. So it's really not trying to like outbrand the biggest players. We're never going to outbrand Amazon or Facebook or these other big companies. It's about being honest about what we have to offer and showing people how they can grow faster, I feel like, here, and make more impact than they might at one of the larger tech companies.
Great, Peter. Thank you for that. That's great. Fee, how do you turn your company's constraints and challenges into compelling employer brand stories that actually attract the right talent? For example, talk about Cornerstone not necessarily being a big brand. I had myself never heard of luxury presence, right? Now you have the luxury of being at Google, but before it, luxury presence. How did you do all the stuff that I asked?
Yeah, we thought of our employer brand early on as our most critical non-monetary asset. So it did a couple things for us. One is it helped us attract really mission-aligned talent. And so your first couple of hires are going to be the folks that are going to be your evangelists. They truly believe in the product, the mission, and those outcomes. So it allows you to retain and attract those people early on. Two, it really differentiates you in a crowded market. So there are a lot of startups that tackle the same problem space, but the way that you are enabling that through either your culture or your product execution or your strategy really matters and resonates with certain people. And then my favorite, it really acts as a filter, right? So one example is when I was recruiting for an operations team early on, I would always tell people, are you prepared to work the hardest you've ever worked? Because that is the upfront filter that I need to be extremely honest about. And so the people that said, yes, let me get on to the next round, this sounds exactly like what I want. It really helps to, one, attract the right people, but to build that brand you wanted. In our case, we knew we had a little bit of funding and we had to do a lot. And so we wanted those people that were going to 5x, 10x their productivity relative to other people. And then as far as, how do we do this without massive budgets? I think authenticity really matters. If you don't have a huge budget, say that. If you're conquering something ambitious and you need folks who are going to be pulling more than the weight that a normal person would do, say that. And so again, I think doing those things and then being extremely mission focused in how you talk about the company, where you focus your company's time and resources, those all play a critical role in ultimately shaping the brand, not only externally to candidates, but internally, it reinforces it with the team that you have in place.
That's huge, Fee. It sounds like it's like be you, right? Be authentic and be you, who you are as a company and a culture. That's one thing that stood out when you mentioned that. And then alignment. At HireClout, we talk a lot about finding alignment for our clients because you can get the technical piece done right. You could even get the what's noticeable cultural piece done right, right? The right people in the right seats, the right technical skills. The problem is if there's no alignment, it's not going to work out. For example, you mentioned, are you ready to work harder than you've ever worked before? I mean, I just visited one of our folks' clients. I won't name the company name, but when I asked how intense the environment is, the person said nights and weekends. And so that's tough. And we have to communicate that to the candidates, because if we don't get that right, it doesn't matter how good the person is, they're not going to work out. They're not going to be happy long term. And so it's just going to be a short term kind of, I don't want to say band-aid, because I'm sure they'll add value, but they won't add a tremendous amount of value to themselves or the company. So that word alignment really stuck out, Fee. Thank you for that. Yolanda, you are big on inclusive kind of hiring practices, right? This is huge for you, and it's proven most effective. Diversity outcomes and overall candidate quality, especially under tight deadlines. Tell me a little bit about how important diversity is to the performance of a company. I think people are doing it wrong. They're doing it to check a box. How do you use that concept of hiring and creating this great diverse company while thinking about the performance of the company?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's unfortunate. I'll start by saying it's unfortunate that DEI now is almost a controversial term. It's so political. But if you go back to peeling back the layers, why is diversity important? What's the impact of not having diversity, right? Answering that question, you then have homogeneous teams where everybody doesn't have there's not a range in thought process. They have the same problem solving toolkit. They all approach, their perspectives are so similar. So then that hinders your ability to be innovative, to take risk, because you have everybody that just thinks the same, right? From the same background. And so when you think about being competitive in a market like this, you want to have the most innovative product, the most innovative everything. To build that, you need to have the teams that can actually think outside of the box, which means diverse teams. And so from a recruiting process, especially when we're talking about speed and hyper growth, it should always be in the beginning of the process, right? Diversity should not, quote unquote, slow down the process. Be baked into your recruiting workflows where there's fairness, right? So if we're all interviewing for the VP of engineering, no one's being asked 10 questions, someone's being asked 5 questions, everybody goes through the same process. So that guarantees fairness. And whatever the outcome is, then you know that you're confident that you've hired the best person for the role. And then most importantly, you also want to make sure that diversity is not a goal for optics, right? It's not the aesthetic of looking inclusive. It's really about improving your business, actually being competitive in the job market. So looking for underrepresented candidates is not so that you can look good, it's so that you can actually be the best innovative employer that you can be in your product, in your thinking strategy. And so looking for those candidates that can bring you that value. And so I'll wrap this up by saying, when you think about when people say anti-DEI, right? Go back to DEI, what that means. Anti-DEI means, anti-diversity means that you don't want diversity, you want uniformity, right? You want inequality, because that's what equality stands for. And then if you don't want the I, it means you want exclusion, and nobody wants that. Everybody wants to be included. Everybody wants equity, feel like everything is fair, right? And so most teams, if you look at Glassdoor, I looked at their score the other day, most candidates will actually prefer to work in teams that are more diverse because they feel like it expands their scope versus teams that are just similar to who they are. So it does help the business be successful, build a very robust, consistent recruiting workflow. You can get that diverse funnel.
That's a great point, Yolanda. It just hit me. We had a client years ago in the Bay Area, and the account executive, the client success manager, had a tough time closing certain candidates. And one time he was like, we were like, you need to problem solve. What's happening? And one of his candidates says, Brian, have you been up there? Like, have you been to their corporate office? And he says, yeah, years ago. Why? He said, look, bunch of great people, but the company is 99% a certain race and a certain sex. That's a lot. Like it's wonderful people, but I can't be in a company like that. And so this became actually a trend where they wanted to hire these wonderful people that weren't their exact type of people that they employed, but those people didn't feel comfortable working there. So it can genuinely cost you great talent if you don't do it right. So thank you for that. For any of you, anybody can answer this. Share a time when a candidate's alignment with your values unexpectedly became the deciding factor, whether you decided to hire them, even if they had gaps, or you decided not to hire them, even though they were brilliant and perfect for the job based on kind of your core values or whatever you used in that time. No one has a story?
So I mean, I think it's always, it's got to be a mix, right? Like people have